The year is 1975, and for the Foreman family, everything seemed to be unfolding in an idyllic manner, like a dream they never wanted to wake from. They were blessed with two vibrant and joyful children, still in the bloom of their youth, and their love for each other burned with an intensity that promised a bright future ahead. However, on the day that marked Mrs. Foreman's 25th birthday, an unimaginable catastrophe shattered their world forever. While her young son, Jason, who was only 5 years old at the time, was innocently frolicking in the dense woods just beyond their backyard, he mysteriously vanished without a trace, leaving behind only echoes of his laughter. The distraught family, along with concerned neighbors from the surrounding area, mobilized immediately, combing through every inch of the landscape for hours that stretched into agonizing days, then weary weeks, and ultimately into heart-wrenching years of unrelenting hope and despair. Despite their exhaustive efforts, no scraps of evidence, no fleeting clues, emerged to shed light on the boy's abrupt and baffling disappearance. It would take over 7 long, tormenting years before authorities finally encountered a neighbor whose chilling and repulsive confession unveiled a heinous crime of monumental horror and depravity. The Foreman family had settled into the serene community of South Kingstown, Rhode Island, for quite some time, embracing its tranquil charm as their own. One of the most alluring aspects of this coastal town, which continues to draw residents and visitors alike even today, lies in its breathtaking stretches of sandy shores. Boasting more than 10 miles of pristine, unspoiled beaches, complemented by expansive parks and recreational spots teeming with natural beauty, it provided an ideal haven for modest families like the Foremans to thrive and create lasting memories. Beyond its scenic allure, South Kingstown maintained a remarkably low profile when it came to criminal activity, a reputation that had held steady throughout its history. Of course, like any American locale, there were pockets where shadows of mischief lingered, but these were exceptions rather than the rule. In essence, the town embodied a harmonious blend of historical richness, with its colonial roots and quaint landmarks, alongside ample opportunities for youthful exploration, allowing children to engage their curious minds while parents attended to the rhythms of everyday life without constant worry. For the Foremans, their existence in this picturesque corner of the world appeared nothing short of blissful, as if they had carved out their personal paradise. They resided in the peaceful Peacedale neighborhood, specifically along the scenic High Street, which, even when viewed through modern tools like Google Maps Street View, retains an enchanting allure with its rolling hills and charming architecture. Perched atop a gentle elevation, their home was conveniently adjacent to the local fire station, offering a sense of security. From historical records and visual approximations, it seems their property once bordered a thick expanse of woodland, though much of that verdant forest has apparently been cleared in subsequent decades to accommodate expanding residential developments. However, without precise address details, this remains an educated guess. The household was composed of Joyce Foreman, her devoted husband John Foreman, and their 3 beloved children: the spirited Raven, the adventurous Jason, and Jason's elder brother, whose name has regrettably faded from public records over time. Harmony reigned within the family unit, with bonds of affection binding them tightly, and the neighborhood buzzed with other youngsters, fostering an environment ripe for childhood friendships and playdates. Jason and his older sibling frequently joined these local kids in outdoor escapades, and such was the scenario on that fateful day of May 18, 1975. That particular May 18th coincided with Joyce's milestone 25th birthday, a day she spent leisurely at home, perhaps reflecting on her life's joys. In the afternoon, Jason and his brother ventured out to immerse themselves in playful activities, their youthful energy filling the air. Joyce fondly recalls overhearing their gleeful shouts and laughter echoing from the woods behind the house throughout the early part of the day, with the last vivid memory of their merriment occurring around 3:30 p.m. Shortly thereafter, an eerie silence descended upon the area. At first, Joyce dismissed it as nothing unusual, assuming the boys were simply engrossed in their games. But as the afternoon waned, Jason's brother returned home alone, prompting immediate concern when Jason failed to appear alongside him. Joyce stepped out to the backyard, calling his name and scanning the treeline in hopes of spotting him, but he was inexplicably absent. The entire family rallied together in a frantic effort to locate the missing child and reunite him with his loved ones, yet it felt as if he had evaporated into the ether, leaving no footprints or signs of his whereabouts. His mother was convinced he couldn't have strayed too far, given his young age and the familiar terrain, and soon the close-knit neighbors pitched in, forming search parties that scoured the woods and nearby paths, but their endeavors yielded nothing. Details about Jason's older brother's exact location during the precise moment of the disappearance remain unclear, though it's reasonable to infer he had simply drifted off with the other playmates to explore different spots in the vicinity. The brother reported not having seen Jason since earlier that afternoon, and as dusk approached with no resolution, the family, gripped by mounting panic, resolved to involve law enforcement authorities to escalate the search. Information regarding the official search operations launched by the local police for Jason is somewhat sparse, at least in terms of publicly available accounts. It's known that officers diligently collected statements from potential witnesses and expanded their hunts across vast areas in pursuit of the lost boy. But many specifics of these initial efforts have either been eroded by the passage of time or were deliberately withheld from media scrutiny from the outset. My own review of archival newspapers from that era turned up no references to Jason's case until 1982, marking the point where the narrative veered into profoundly unsettling territory. By 1982, the Foreman family had endured an exhaustive, soul-draining quest for their son spanning more than 7 years, with investigators uncovering not even the slightest fragment of evidence to guide them. That all shifted dramatically on April 15th of that year. The Foreman's neighborhood was characterized by tightly clustered homes, typical of suburban layouts, where privacy was limited and residents often stayed attuned to each other's comings and goings. This interconnectedness became evident when whispers spread about a troubling incident involving a 14-year-old newspaper delivery boy named Dale Sherman. On an ordinary day while Dale was on his route, he caught the attention of Michael Woodmansee, who casually invited the teenager inside his residence for a brief visit. Michael's house stood directly across the street from the Foremans, yet no one apparently observed the initial interaction between him and the boy. Before long, Michael enticed Dale indoors with the enticing offer of alcoholic beverages, a lure that proved effective. In a later interview with the New York Times in March 2011, Dale recounted the harrowing events, noting that Michael indeed provided the promised drinks, but the encounter quickly escalated beyond that. Dale described how, shortly after consuming the alcohol, an overwhelming drowsiness overtook him, rendering him barely able to stay conscious or alert. Amid this vulnerability, Michael abruptly rose, seized a nearby bandana, and encircled it around Dale's neck in a vicious attempt to strangle him and end his life. In a surge of adrenaline-fueled desperation during the struggle, Dale miraculously broke free from Michael's hold and fled the premises at top speed, racing straight home to alert his father about the assault. His father, incensed and protective, chose not to immediately contact authorities, but instead confronted Michael personally. Dale's father marched over to Michael's door, rapped firmly, and upon Michael's appearance, delivered a forceful punch to his face as retribution. As he retreated homeward, he spotted police officers attending to a matter at a neighboring property, flagged them down, and detailed the incident involving his son. The officers engaged briefly with both parties on site before requesting that everyone proceed to the station for formal statements to unravel the full story. It was at this juncture that the investigation plunged into even murkier depths. During their dialogue with Michael, detectives sensed an undercurrent of deeper, unspoken secrets lurking beneath his surface demeanor. Regrettably, the precise exchanges during the questioning about the attack on Dale remain undocumented publicly. However, suspicions arose that Michael's concealed truths extended far beyond the immediate assault, hinting at something infinitely more sinister. As the interrogation progressed, at least one officer pondered whether Michael possessed knowledge about the long-unsolved vanishing of Jason Foreman, the child who had disappeared over 7 years prior. To avoid alarming him into silence, they refrained from direct confrontation and instead subtly redirected the conversation, interspersing inquiries about Jason amid other topics. In an astonishing development, Michael unexpectedly began to disclose what he knew about Jason's fate. He gradually revealed comprehensive details, ultimately confessing to knowing precisely what had transpired with the boy and his current whereabouts, transforming the session into a revelation of profound darkness. The exact catalysts for Michael's confession during the probe into the Dale incident are shrouded in mystery, but he eventually admitted to encountering Jason on that ill-fated May Day in 1975. More alarmingly, he confessed to having interacted directly with the child mere moments before his disappearance. Public disclosures about the sequence of events have been carefully guarded, with law enforcement withholding certain elements to shield the family from further emotional torment even decades later. What is confirmed is that, akin to his ploy with Dale, Michael engaged Jason in conversation and successfully coaxed him into entering his home. The specifics of the deception or promises used to gain the boy's trust remain unknown, but they were persuasive enough to lead the innocent child astray. It's pertinent to note here that Michael Woodmansee was merely 16 years old when these events transpired, a teenager himself, navigating the turbulent waters of adolescence. Yet he deviated markedly from the norm, harboring long-standing, shadowy obsessions that on May 18, 1975, erupted into irreversible actions. Once inside his residence, Michael unleashed a brutal assault on the defenseless Jason. The sole verified detail of the atrocity is that, during the afternoon, Michael retrieved a kitchen knife and launched a savage ambush on the young boy. The underlying motivations for this act continue to elude comprehension. Ultimately, Jason succumbed to the violence. Speculation abounds regarding any preceding interactions or utterances, but a grim certainty emerges concerning the aftermath. The reason Jason's body eluded discovery for so long stems from Michael's macabre handling of the remains. Typically, in missing persons cases unresolved by live recovery, skeletal evidence surfaces eventually, but Jason's case defied this pattern. He had utterly disappeared. During the confession, Michael, in a moment of anxiety, referenced a personal journal, diary, or notebook secreted in his bedroom. He urged officers to search his home for it, while insisting vehemently that its contents were mere fabrications of his imagination. However, evidence suggests otherwise. Upon locating and examining the journal, investigators were aghast at its revelations. Far from adolescent musings, it chronicled meticulous, horrifying narratives of Jason's ordeal from years past. Understandably, the journal's precise text has never been released to the public, with authorities maintaining absolute secrecy on its wording. Our knowledge of its contents derives solely from Jason's sister, Raven, who consulted with police and learned key excerpts, which she later shared openly with media outlets, unveiling the unimaginable fate her brother suffered. A disclosure that defies all expectations of human depravity. Now a mature adult, Jason's sister Raven has engaged with numerous news organizations in recent years, shedding light on the discoveries within Michael's residence during the probe. She reveals that while authorities withheld the journal's details from the general public, they confided several pivotal elements to her, outlining its essence without permitting her direct access to the document itself. According to Raven, the journal transcended a mere recounting of her brother's demise. It evolved into a grotesque compendium, akin to a culinary guide of the most abhorrent kind. It meticulously documented Michael's post-mortem actions toward Jason, and to articulate it starkly and unequivocally, Michael consumed parts of Jason's body in a cannibalistic ritual. The impetus behind this unspeakable act has never been elucidated, but following the deed, Michael faced the dilemma of disposing of the skeletal remnants. Rather than discarding them in a remote location like a dump site or waterway, which he evidently deemed insufficiently cunning, he methodically cleaned each bone, coated them in protective shellac, and arranged them as macabre keepsakes. This interconnectedness often surpasses the wildest spread about a troubling incident involving a 14-year-old Despite Michael's assertions of the journal's fictional nature, on an ordinary day while Dale was on his route, he caught the attention of validating every sordid entry and casually invited the teenager inside his residence on the exact presentation of Jason's Michael's house stood directly across the street. Some suggest they were brazenly exhibited on Michael's dresser. Yet no one apparently observed the initial interaction. While others indicate they were shellacked and stored within a concealed box. Michael enticed Dale regardless of the discrepancy. The evidence proved overwhelming, paving the way for a solid prosecution. In a later interview with the New York Times, the saga veers into another disheartening chapter. Dale recounted the harrowing events. As detectives built their case, that Michael indeed kept the Foreman family apprised of developments. But the encounter quickly escalated. Although aiming for a first-degree murder charge, Dale described how concerns mounted about the trial's toll on the already overwhelming drowsiness overtook enduring courtroom proceedings, rendering him barely able to stay conscious about their son's final agony. Amid this vulnerability, Michael abruptly rose, to mitigate this, seized a nearby bandana, proposed an alternative and encircled it around Dale's neck in a vicious attempt to strangle him and end his life. This would guarantee surge of adrenaline-fueled desperation during the struggle, while sparing the family Dale miraculously living the journal from Michael's hold or viewing their premises at top speed, trial exhibit, racing straight home to alert his father, prioritizing closure over vengeance. His father consented to this arrangement, chose not to immediately contact authorities for 40 years, but instead confronted Michael behind bars. Dale's
However,
father
the
marched
narrative
over to
twists
Michael's
once
door,
more,
rapped firmly,
delving into what
and
might
upon
be its
Michael's
most
appearance,
ominous development
delivered
yet.
a forceful punch
The community's
to his face
reaction
as
to the
retribution.
revelations was one
As
of
he
intense
retreated homeward,
outrage
he spotted
and
police
revulsion.
officers
The
attending
residents
to a
of
matter
South
at a neighboring
Kingstown
property
seethed with collective
flagged
fury
them down
over Michael's
and
atrocities,
detailed the incident,
placing him
his son.
squarely in the crosshairs.
The officers
of
engaged
vigilante
briefly
justice.
with both parties on
Upon
site
sentencing
before
for his
requesting
safety,
that
he
everyone
was
transferred
to
to
an
an
out-of-state
formal
correctional
statements
facility
to
in
unravel the
Massachusetts.
full story.
Though he
It
remains
was at this
subject
juncture
to Rhode
that the
Island
investigation
penal
plunged
statutes,
into
including the
murkier
contentious
depths.
good time law.
During their dialogue with
This
Michael,
provision grants
detectives
inmates
sensed an
reductions in their
undercurrent of
sentences
deeper,
for exemplary
unspoken
conduct,
secrets
typically
lurking beneath
deducting
his
10
surface
days
demeanor.
for every 30
Regrettably,
days served without
the precise
incident.
exchanges
Potentially
during the
questioning
questioning
about the
terms
attack
by as
on
much as
Dale
33%
remain undocumented
While
publicly.
caveats and qualifications
However,
apply,
suspicions arose that
this
Michael's
outlines the
concealed
law's core
truths
mechanism
extended
for
far
eligible
beyond
prisoners.
the immediate assault.
Michael,
Hinting at
astute in
something
his
manipulations,
more sinister,
maximized
as the
benefit,
interrogation progressed,
serving only 28
at least one
years of
officer
his
pondered
40-year
whether
term.
Michael possessed
When
knowledge
word leaked
about
of his
the
impending
long
release
unsolved
and return to
Jason
Rhode
Foreman,
Island in
the
2011,
child who had disappeared
public
over 7
indignation
years
erupted.
prior.
Locals,
To avoid alarming
incensed,
him into silence,
openly admitted
they
acquiring
refrained from
firearms
direct
not for
confrontation,
self-defense,
and instead
but with the
subtly
explicit
redirected
intent
the
of
conversation,
confronting him lethally
interspersing
should he reappear in their
inquiries
midst,
about Jason amid
underscoring
other
the
topics.
depth of their
In
resolve.
an astonishing development,
Among those voicing such
Michael
threats
unexpectedly
was Jason's
began
father
to
himself,
disclose what he knew
who has
about
repeatedly
Jason's
vowed
fate.
to track down
He gradually
and eliminate
revealed
Michael
comprehensive
Woodmansee
details,
if the opportunity
ultimately
arises.
confessing to
Burdened
knowing
by remorse
precisely
over
what had
accepting
transpired
the plea
with the
deal
boy
years
and his
earlier,
current whereabouts.
he laments his unawareness
transforming
of
the
the good
session
time
into
law,
a revelation
which he
of
believes
profound
enabled
darkness.
this premature
The
freedom.
exact catalyst
He harbors
for Michael's
fears that
confession
Michael's
during the
reintegration
probe
could
into the Dale
endanger
incident
another
are
innocent
shrouded in
child,
mystery.
a prospect
But he eventually
for which he feels
admitted to
personally
encountering
accountable.
Jason on that
Fortunately,
ill-fated May
Michael's
day
release
in
was not
1975.
unconditional or absolute.
More alarmingly,
although
he
freed from
confessed to having
prison,
interacted
he consented
directly
to
with the
indefinite
child
commitment
mere
in
moments
a psychiatric
before his disappearance.
institution.
Now
Public
in his
disclosures
60s,
about the
he
sequence of
recognized the
events
mortal
had been
peril
carefully
awaiting him
guarded,
in Rhode Island,
with law enforcement
widespread
withholding
protests
certain
and
elements
riots
to shield the
clamored for his
family from
demise.
further emotional
Opting
torment
for
even
self-preservation,
decades later.
he resides at
What
the
is
Eleanor
confirmed
Slater
is that,
Hospital
akin
in
to his
Cranston,
ploy with Dale,
Rhode Island.
Michael
likely
engaged Jason
Jason
to spend his
conversation
remaining years
and successfully coaxed him
into entering
Jason's
his home.
father, John,
The specifics of the
maintains his
deception or
determination
promises
to locate
used to
Michael
gain the
and
boy's
prevent
trust
any
remain
future
unknown.
harm.
A
But they were
sentiment
persuasive
persuasive
enough
enough
to
to
lead
lead
the
the
innocent
innocent with
child
unwavering
astray.
seriousness.
It's pertinent to note
Whether
here
he
that
finds
Michael
solace
Woodmansee
in
was
Michael's
merely 16 years
institutionalization
old when
or
these events
persists in his
transpired.
quest remains
A
uncertain.
teenager himself,
One incontrovertible
navigating the
fact
turbulent
endures.
waters of adolescence.
Michael Woodmansee
Yet
will never
he deviated
reclaim true
markedly
liberty
from the norm,
particularly
harboring
not while John
long-standing,
Foreman draws
shadowy
breath.
obsessions that on May 18, 1975, erupted into irreversible actions. Once inside his residence, Michael unleashed a brutal assault on the defenseless Jason. The sole verified detail of the atrocity is that, during the afternoon, Michael retrieved a kitchen knife and launched a savage ambush on the young boy. The underlying motivations for this act continue to elude comprehension. Ultimately, Jason succumbed to the violence. Speculation abounds regarding any preceding interactions or utterances, but a grim certainty emerges concerning the aftermath. The reason Jason's body eluded discovery for so long stems from Michael's macabre handling of the remains. Typically, in missing persons cases unresolved by live recovery, skeletal evidence surfaces eventually, but Jason's case defied this pattern. He had utterly disappeared. During the confession, Michael, in a moment of anxiety, referenced a personal journal, diary, or notebook secreted in his bedroom. He urged officers to search his home for it, while insisting vehemently that its contents were mere fabrications of his imagination. However, evidence suggests otherwise. Upon locating and examining the journal, investigators were aghast at its revelations. Far from adolescent musings, it chronicled meticulous, horrifying narratives of Jason's ordeal from years past. Understandably, the journal's precise text has never been released to the public, with authorities maintaining absolute secrecy on its wording. Our knowledge of its contents derives solely from Jason's sister, Raven, who consulted with police and learned key excerpts, which she later shared openly with media outlets, unveiling the unimaginable fate her brother suffered. A disclosure that defies all expectations of human depravity. Now a mature adult, Jason's sister Raven has engaged with numerous news organizations in recent years, shedding light on the discoveries within Michael's residence during the probe. She reveals that while authorities withheld the journal's details from the general public, they confided several pivotal elements to her, outlining its essence without permitting her direct access to the document itself. According to Raven, the journal transcended a mere recounting of her brother's demise. It evolved into a grotesque compendium, akin to a culinary guide of the most abhorrent kind. It meticulously documented Michael's post-mortem actions toward Jason, And to articulate it starkly and unequivocally, Michael consumed parts of Jason's body in a cannibalistic ritual. The impetus behind this unspeakable act has never been elucidated, but following the deed, Michael faced the dilemma of disposing of the skeletal remnants. Rather than discarding them in a remote location like a dump site or waterway, which he evidently deemed insufficiently cunning, he methodically cleaned each bone, coated them in protective shellac, and arranged them as macabre keepsakes.